named after his mother, Jan, and his father, Jack. Jan being the Barracuda, Jack being the sheriff. But there's a couple things here, and they both had pivotal influences and impacts, obviously, on John. But there's something that you guys have heard me talk about, and I'm sure these are anecdotes that a lot of you can remember hearing elsewhere. But it's interesting because Jan, when this is on page 23 in chapter 2, the Barracuda and the Sheriff, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but when I got to it here in the chapter, I wanted to start here. And that is, I'm going to go ahead and quote Jason Cole here. Jan, okay, that's Mama. Jan was never much to mince words, even, hold on, let me make sure. Here we go. Jan was never one to mince words, even with her own children. In January of 1998, John had come home from helping the Broncos win the AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh to qualify for Super Bowl 32. It was going to be John's fourth chance to finally win a title, because remember, up to that point, Elway had led the Broncos to 3 Super Bowls in the 80s, 3 in 4 years, and lost each one in colossal fashion. But it also came after 3 progressively painful losses earlier in his career. With all the love, compassion, and caring a mother could muster, Jan sat in her son's house that January, looked at him and said, "Do we really have to go back to the Super Bowl?" The idea of losing again made her wince, but the sharpness of her tone made it sound as if losing was inevitable. The whole idea of competing to the end was a little lost on her. Elway laughed, but also got the point, close quote. So very interesting that the protective mama bear, and she probably didn't mean it. Of course, she probably aspired for her son to get to the top of the mountain. She wished for him to become a world champion and check that box on his NFL resume. But at the same time, the pain of those losses was brutal. And especially in the house of Elway, because Jack, I mean, again, Elway, John got his competitive spirit from his dad. And it tells a story, too, in here when Jack, who was serving as the offensive coordinator of his alma mater, Washington State, when they lost a brutal game against Washington, the Apple Cup, they called it, when it's Washington versus Washington State, battle for Washington. And Jack's team had Washington dead to rights. And Washington was quarterbacked then by Warren Moon, who went on, of course, to become a Hall of Fame quarterback. And they had them dead to rights, with less than 5 minutes to go. They were up by 13 points. And through a series of unfortunate events, they ended up losing. And the head coach, Jack's boss, leading up to that game, he'd not had a successful career coaching at Washington State. And so what he had said is, if we lose this game, I'm going to resign. And true to his word, he did resign. But it tells the story about when they come walking out of that game and they get on the bus. John's with his dad, Jack, and it's the bitterness of that disappointment, the humiliation of losing in the fashion that they lost, knowing that the head coach was going to have to resign and all that. John, kind of feeling for his dad, hops in next to him on the bus for the long ride home. And his dad just looks at him and says, "Sit there and shut up." Because he was so bitter and pissed and in such a bad mood because he had the team in position to win that game. That game wasn't lost because of Jack, but we don't need to go down that road. But the reason I bring up that anecdote is obviously winning was paramount.